All right, welcome to episode 26 of the Crom Updates. I'm joined once again by Jason Schoonover, who just last night sent over to me a print my own Gut and Ghost. You call this a mini comic, Jason?
Yeah, I'd call it a mini comic. It's the story goes over 9 pages,
Right.
And then with the stapled format, I kind of had some extra pages to fill in, and I just happen to have the right amount of little 1-page comics that I'd made to kind of fill out the rest. Right. But it had kind of outgrown the folding zine format, which you only get 6 pages, to kind of do your thing with, which is fun. And then as Jake had pointed out too, it's also small and a little bit hard to read, and some of the details get lost. So I'm very excited to have this, kind of in a little bit bigger format, but I like the, not like a full comic book size format, because I think that also reflects the amount of content, I guess, that's in here, the amount of comics and stories that are in here. But that's not to belittle, I think, what is in here, because I don't know. I kind of feel like I packed quite a bit in 9 pages, probably too much, but I around page, 4 and 5, it started to get really off the rails, and I tried to figure out how to kind of, because I kind of looked at it as like a balloon, expanding and contracting, because it starts rather simple, and then when they meet the landlord or the brain lord, that's when things just kind of go bananas, and we're all of a sudden in a suburb with a 3 it's just throwing a lot at you. So
yeah, let me jump in, because one of the reasons you and I are talking right now is I reached out to you because I've been following you. I was following you on Instagram, and I'm doing a revised edition of my Crom the Barbarian, and I'll share a little bit more. But I thought you were the second person, based on David Molina following you, saying, oh, you got to get Jason Schoonover involved. And I was like, I've been thinking about it, but I don't know if he would really dig doing a barbarian pinup. But this is what you provided for. I mean, it's just speechless. And I also want to say, down in the description is a link to Jason's Instagram as well as his website, because Jason, you have been on fire with the promotion. You have been providing a lot of insight. You've been doing far more than trying, brother. You have been really putting out some stuff. I've been watching, I think, almost everything. I think even last night I saw something and I was like, wait a second, how old is this? And have I seen it? Or there could be more. So I just have to praise you for putting all the efforts going in. But I also want to say, I think I really do believe you have something very specific to a voice, your own voice. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about your process in putting together, because you just were going on as I interrupted about, getting a little let's say lost or confused, because you're the only one at the point until it gets printed, making sense of it all. So that's my question. Yeah. That's my question. So you were saying on page 3, 4, I guess 3 and 4, where you start going off the rails, as you will. What is the mechanism in your brain that's saying you're going off the rails and you need to reel it in? Because I suffer from the same thing. And I think a lot of people do.
I mean, it's kind of hard to describe, because it's a lot of this is very much a process of just having tunnel vision, you know?
Yeah.
Originally, when we had first got together talking about Gut and Ghost, I was telling you I should have grabbed the sketchbook I had it in, but I had come up with these characters in 2015.
Yeah.
And the idea was just to kind of oh, it's like Aqua Teen Hunger Force. You get these three nonsense, like, kind of roommates, and they have, like, non sequitur kind of wacky adventures. And I had written basically just the outline of, like, the bulb going out, and that's as far as I'd gotten. Like, I designed a landlord character, but it's nothing at all like what I landed on with Brainlord. But basically, it was I was at a very frustrating point in my life when I had kind of come back to this comic. I needed something to kind of focus on. I had just, like, freshly gotten out of, like, talk therapy for various, things that were, happening in my life and stuff like that.
Right.
But one of the things that I really took away from that was dream journaling.
Ooh.
And I did that, like, for the course of, like, a year. And I read this book that my therapist had recommended me. Oh gosh, what was it? It's by Robert A. Johnson. I'll have to send you the link. I can't remember what it is.
Please, thank you.
But it talks about, like, it's called Inner Work. That's what it's called.
All right.
And it just talks about, like, how you can analyze your dreams, and then also, like, doing this thing called active imagination, which kind of allows you to, like, take the premise that your dream sets up. And since imagination and dreams both can kind of come from the same well of the subconscious,
mm-hmm.
It's equally as valid as, like, you going to bed and having this weird dream. Whatever you can kind of come up with, if you can kind of connect those dots to those things, like, that's where I think a lot of magic happens. But I mean, so this in particular, like, I knew it was kind of wacky. So I was like, all right, well, I'll start simple. The light goes out. A ghost can't touch lights. And, like, I kind of was informed by, like, their nature. So, like, Gut is a very, he's just going to do something without thinking. Whereas Ghost is, like, contemplative almost to a fault, where he analyzes things too much. And even his attempt to dive right in, like, he goes, oh yeah, I forgot I'm incorporeal. I just go right through it. Gut cauterizes his mouth shut. So, like, there was some comedy I thought that you could derive from that, and I respond a lot to, just that type of humor, I guess. And then, then I was thinking, like, well, since these guys can't take care of this problem themselves, maybe they're renting this flesh apartment from somebody. So, we get to Brainlord. And then Brainlord, I think a lot, again, like, these characters, I think, are kind of informed by what they look like, I guess, and what they're named or whatever. So, like, he's got this massive expanding, I mean, people think it's a brain, but it's like, it's tumors and lumps and stuff like that. I put a big third eye tumor right in the middle. So it's kind of like this, this, like, false light, that you can kind of follow, but you think you're going the right way. And the kind of non sequitur that he takes us on, like, I felt like, I did this and I was like, wow, I really love this panel. I really love this. But then I was like, well, where do you, like, go from here? We were already in a flesh apartment. Now we're in Brainlord's domain, where these, like, teratomas are budding off of them in the endless sea of Coke Zeros. And so it was just getting, like, trying to grasp all these different elements and be like, all right, what can I do with these? And then I kind of just relied on the character Gut, kind of just shooting off at the mouth and being like, dude, what the hell are you talking about? Like, it's just like when you go to a bar and, like, some, like, barfly just starts talking to you and you're like, dude, I have no context for any of this. This doesn't make any sense. But it's still, like, some of it's, like, kind of compelling and interesting. And you're like, oh, what is going on in this guy's mind? Yeah. So when I got to this page and this page, I was like, all right, so I'm seeing it as, like, you start here and it's like you're pumping up the balloon and it's getting bigger. We got the light bulb going out, the impetus for action. We got a little bit of them trying to solve the problem, which ends in either tragedy or comedy, because he's got to, like, cauterizes his mouth shut and he's got to mutilate himself to be able to breathe again. So, there's, like, a dark comedic element to it. So it's expanding and expanding. And then when you get to this setting, it's like, it's just getting bigger and bigger, and it gets bigger and bigger. And at some point, it's like it just gets too big, to even handle. So it's like, all right, now we got to bring it back in. We got to throw some reins on this thing, maybe deflate it a little bit. So we go back to Brainlord's apartment, and it's like, all right, well, he explains that non sequitur away as like, oh, that's just what I've heard. Either way, I got no bulbs. So we still arrive at the same spot we were in when they first entered the apartment. Which, again, like with this character, like he's a disgusting snot dripping from him, warts, and he's just not a pleasant guy to look at, but it's a lot of fun to draw.
Yep.
Ghost asks him for like, well, what are we supposed to do? So, and then this, I'll just like, I stole it from the movie Shrek. There's a little bit during one of the montage scenes where he pulls earwax out of his ear and, lights it like a candle. So I had Brainlord, I'll move a little closer, pulling the earwax out. I really like the onomatopoeia. I did the squish and then writing it into the earwax, slorp, and then plop. And that's his solution to their lighting problem. So it's just more gross out kind of comedy, but I feel like that's kind of where we were at when we had, the light bulb going out and him cutting his mouth open. So it's more, more just looking at these, like if I were watching a movie, like for example, like a David Lynch movie, some of the things that are like very frustrating about his movies are they just seem to keep expanding and expanding and expanding. And not that I'm asking him for some sort of explanation, but like, his better movies tend to kind of expand and then contract, like Blue Velvet, for example, goes so off the rails when we meet, what's his name's character?
Dennis Hopper's Frank.
Dennis Hopper. It gets so off the rails, and I think it kind of like, it crescendos when they get to that guy's apartment and he's singing that song into the stage light, and it's like, I don't know what I'm watching, but this is like the most compelling thing I've ever seen. But then when he takes him out of the apartment and he's going into the desert to kill him or whatever, it's like, okay, now this makes sense because the crux of the movie is there was a crime committed. There's this weird conspiracy, the nature of which you can't even comprehend, which is like why I think you get kind of those like surrealist elements in there. It's supposed to be like, this is bigger than you and you can't comprehend it. And you're just kind of, from Kyle MacLachlan's perspective, a small town kind of naive boy. So I kind of tried to take that.
So the thing, let me jump in because I think the answer to my question, which is exactly the thing that I also struggle with, is the story structure. In other words, you get something started, you're really excited about something, and it's just one piece of paper, but it ends up being 3 panels, and it's 2 characters, and a thing happens, right? So the brain goes, oh. And you stand up proud with your hands on your hips and you go, I just created a little story. Well, then maybe I should continue. What I'm getting at, Jason, is this idea of conformity to what is necessary for said good story. The thing I also want to inject is, you were one of the first in our Jake and I, Turbo Pit Fighter, indie comic creator exchange interviews, and we had your little version of this, and you were basically out at this point where I was making all of these compliments, if you will, about the modern fine arts aesthetic. And that's where I
remember you made a comparison to Nude Descending a Staircase. That was very flattering.
Yes, Marcel Duchamp. So the thing about it, once again, is just to poke your bear here in because I'm super interested in why we have to make sense of it for the reader. Like you already in the last, I would maybe say 7 or 8 minutes, have given us a lot, and especially about like you had gone through some therapy, and you were discussing things and coming to terms or at least eyeing it up, and then you get into dreams, and then you know what I mean, and then so there's all this wonderful stuff, but then there's this triggering mechanism that says, oh, okay, stop, Jason, you got to make sense of it. So. I just want to add, like, I only say this in the most positive way, that most people, my wife included, would look at this in a very repulsed way, and repulsed once again in a good thing. In other words, it's like it's so much information. It's not colored. So I don't know why I'm looking at this. A lot of people, once again. Two, nothing right now makes any sense, but if an educated mind, and I'm referring to something in the way of like arts educated, being able to read images, these types of things, just had this to go on, like me, I'm screaming more. I don't know if I want you to make sense of it, though. And that's just my injection for getting you to spill your beans on how you're making sense of it, or why make sense of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think in some ways, like, I'm doing this for sure, like, absolutely for me. And at the same time, like, I do want, people to read it. But similar to the Crom thing, like, I don't expect somebody to pick this up and, like, maybe I'll get like a couple hundred people that are really into Gut and Ghost or whatever. Like, it's a very niche thing. It's black and white. I kind of, it's informed by dreams and active imagination and like old journal entries and stuff. So it's like, it kind of has a surrealist bent to it. So I think there's precedence for the amount of weird I let it get. And I try to push that as far as it can go until it just becomes like, throw all the crayons on the floor and like, make a big mess and then I'm done. Right. I think one of the things like, when discussing like with my therapist that we would keep coming back to is like, there amidst like kind of the chaos of like analyzing dreams, which can be like just gobbledygook sometimes, or they seem like, but like one of the things I found over the year of just like almost every night, like having a dream that like the more I would journal them would become more and more vivid and more memorable.
Yes.
There were a lot of elements that my subconscious was returning to that would kind of expand on like kind of the premises it was giving me.
Yeah.
Which they had their own logic to with the subconscious, but in order to make it, like one of the things in therapy is like, it was kind of our job to take those things from the subconscious that were screaming at us in the conscious world, once we finally dug them out and put them on paper and be like, okay, well, like how does this apply to me? I mean, it's very similar, I think, to like, I was thinking a lot about in therapy about the story of Joseph in the Bible and how he was like really gifted at interpreting dreams and the Pharaoh brought him over and stuff. So one of the things I find like since going to therapy that I'm really attracted to is like this line between it doesn't make sense and it does make sense. Like, I don't want to spell anything out for anybody because a lot of this has like deeply personal meanings to me, but I tried to pick things that were, if people bring their own baggage to it, like, well, like a ghost and a gut and the idea of a light. Like the light is like the oldest metaphor of all time. In the beginning, or God said, like, let there be light, and that can stand for all kinds of things, inspiration, consciousness. So yeah, I tried to pick these like elements and like, again, like it just so happened, that I was going through old artwork and I was like, oh man, I forgot I drew this and I had this set up so long ago. I feel like I can expand on this dream that I had nearly 10 years ago, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So for me, just kind of putting it out on paper, it kind of, and like, again, like giving it some sort of order, like what I was looking at when I first started was like, all right, I don't understand comic book page composition other than it needs to go left to right and top to bottom. So I was like, if I keep those as simple as possible, that'll be the kind of box that I can work in. And then I started on the first panel, I started doing things like this where the light rays are exiting the panel.
Yeah.
And then I did it again with the knife kind of exiting the panel. And then you get to Brain Lord and his brain is just going into the bleed of the page. So I kept playing with elements like that, the trees kind of exiting the panel here. I mean, it gives the drawing depth, I think, but I think it also plays into whatever theme that I'm going for, as far as like, it has to make some sort of sense because I'm putting a structure to it. But at the same time, whatever goes on in this box it's gonna happen.
Do you know what makes
them just gonna happen?
Do you know what makes the most sense, Jason? Is
what's that?
Your mark making. See the connection I believe with comic book art, and I'm opening up more and more this type of dialogue, because I don't believe too many comic books are read like books. They're obviously not books, though.
Yeah.
We and I just include myself in the comic book making industry, but are making, probably for the last 15 years, book to movie level comic books. You know, everybody wants their comic to be turned into a cartoon or thing. So a lot of what's been missing is the art form itself, which is these word and picture panels moving along. But
yes,
I think the more attractive part, especially for me, and why I constantly return to comics as a profession, as a creative outlet, and for collecting and wanting to share with others, is the art. And
yes, for sure. Even if the story's like subpar, I'm always going back to something if the art's good.
And
yes,
and if you were really to start, number one, to critique a comic book, you would start with the cover, obviously, and you see this with the millions of review comic interview, review videos on YouTube. But immediately, just this alone, graphic image set aside, you make so much sense with your mark making. It's undeniable. So the question comes back that are you emotionally concerned with people dealing with said imagery and making sense of it? Is that another place where you feel like you get like you've kind of drawn yourself into a corner?
Yeah, I mean, I think a little bit, because we, without getting too in the weeds here, I think like a lot of, my art making or whatever is very much rooted in, childhood. And I think a lot of that probably comes from like wanting some sort of sense of validation from, when you're a kid, it's your parent or whatever authority figures. You want somebody to tell you, oh, you're doing a good job. I like this about that.
Yes.
And then, I got like an art degree and like didn't do anything with it. And I was like, well, I'm never going to get a job doing the stuff that I like. So how can I apply this to the real world and like kind of get a real job? And I fell into like house painting, which I really enjoyed. Like there's an absolute craft
I agree.
to painting a room or painting whatever you're painting. Like it's very similar to drawing, and there's like a process that you can kind of get lost in. But I got injured, and we had another kid, and the stresses of dealing with like chronic pain and and trying to manage that, and some mobility issues. Like it's not major, but like they're if I keep down this using my body to, you're basically destroying your body when you're doing like physical labor. I mean, you could do it. You can lift things the correct way for so long, but at some point it's just, you got to get the job done. And now you're heave hoeing and you're coming home, and the next day, like you can't move because your back hurts so bad.
Yeah.
So it just became like untenable for me to do that. And I was like, this is the only other thing that I could do. And it just so happened that like, talking to the therapist kind of about, and a lot of it was just like my dreams or whatever. And then it would be like, we'd work backwards from there. Kind of helped me to like unravel like whatever it is inside of me that doesn't make any sense even to me, and like kind of start getting at that. And then I think the next step for that is like to become a person is like, well, it's not all about me. I need to be able to relate to others. So in a way, like I do want to be understood with this, but it's kind of just throwing a line out to see like what comes back,
Yep.
you know? So I think I kind of might have got away from your question.
But
I think a lot of it's just like rooted in wanting some sort of validation.
I'm like I said, I'm poking you as the bear, but all of us face this. All of us face this, and I think one of those little fine lines that we walk as educated artists. In other words, you go to art school, you spend all this time and money, you get out, got to get a job. Everybody expects you to get a job. I always knew I was going to do comic books. I just unfortunately by the end of college knew I didn't want to make anything that looked like what comic books were making at that point.
Oh, yeah.
Other than heavy metal was still kind of holding its own. So in being introduced to Simon Beasley, I think it was like in 89.
Yeah.
Keeping up with Philip Drouillet, Moebius, so on and so forth. I always felt that there was a hope for me. I thought I was just going to have to move to Europe to be understood or accepted or make a living at it. But the same thing, I wanted to, I just got a job, waiting tables and, so on and so forth, and would come back and forth and do all kinds of things. But I think the thing we can kind of leave this at is the last question I have is how do you feel right now in the way of distributing this? So, now flipping the table and say, all right, you just wasted all this time. How are you going to make your money back, Jason? And, sell 1,000 copies through a comic book store. But what is that feeling? What is that feeling for this in being able to at least get it out there in people's hands?
Well, I'll tell you, it's not as exciting as like putting pen to paper once I kind of figured out like a layout or a loose script or whatever. Right. But I think like, again, it's the other half of that coin. Like, it's a very kind of isolating experience when you're just kind of focused on this. I talked about having tunnel vision before, which is like, it's the same dynamic of taking those dreams and bringing them into the real world. And the real world is filled with other people other than me, so it's a necessary step of the work, I think, where it's like, I spent a lot of time trying to make some sense of this to myself. And while doing this, like, I think one of the smarter things I did was I kept making those folding zines every time I would finish like a couple of pages and then, draw a new cover for it. Yep. And, just get those. And, they weren't selling, which is like fine or whatever. But like, if I gave them to people, they would read them. And I would say like either, the people that would read them, like almost 100% of them would be like, yo, when is there going to be more of this? Exactly. Like, this is great. Like they liked it. So I was, it was very much like adding fuel to the furnace to be able to come back and make more. But I think the problem with that format was like, it was inherently cheap. It wasn't necessarily a good product, which is, where I kind of come back to Jake's critique when he was talking about, well, it's small, the lettering's not, the easiest to read in this smaller format. Right. So now it's like, again, just similar to taking these kind of off the wall ideas and how they expanded to contracting. Now that I have it in some sort of box, it's kind of like, all right, well, how do I trim the fat to make this marketable? So I have a deadline, a hard deadline by August. I'm doing a zine fest. Well, I applied for a zine fest in Charleston, but the lady I met who runs it was pretty enthusiastic about me, signing up for it again after I had given her one of those fold out zines.
Awesome.
So I'm pretty sure I'll get accepted, but so the hard deadline is like, all right, I want to come up with this print format. I'm going to take the time and learn how to make a font, based on my hand lettering, so I could clean up, some of the lettering inside of the word bubbles, which is pretty inconsistent. I was watching your guys' video on, I think it was just a little short on kerning the letters and stuff like that. And I was like, yeah, my kerning is all over the place. I got to fix this. So it's just minor things like that just to get it marketable. And then with this format too, like, I mean, you have to have a certain amount of space. So I can easily pack this with things that are relevant to Gut and Ghost or things that I was working on at the same time, like, the little one-page bonus comics or whatever. I could even put, the scans of the old sketchbook stuff in there to be like, oh, this is the origins of Gut and Ghost. So
yeah, cool.
Kind of like a look into so it's like you're getting more than just a comic. You're getting a look into kind of the process a little bit, I think, but not directly. And then I think something like this too, like for this, I just got a piece of Bristol board and, folded it like a little cover or whatever. But I'm working on a new cover here, which is what I'll be drawing today. But one of the things I want to do is like print a few of them and then staple the covers together myself with like a piece of Bristol board or watercolor paper, and then just do one-off kind of custom covers. Like, maybe I'll do one where it's like Gut and Ghost is like Sonic the Hedgehog, but it'll be full color. But take my time with it and try to crank out as many as I can before August. But that's always been my main problem is I don't have, when people ask me to do like markets and stuff, I'm like, I got like stickers and I can hand out free zines. And if anybody wants to sit for 20 minutes, I'll draw you. But not a lot of people like go for that. Which I understand. It's like everybody's got stickers and everybody's got, little tchotchkes like that. So it's like, what can I do to stand out? Well, I'm going to make a whole ass comic book that looks like something you could go buy off the rack at your actual comic book shop. And I'm going to do it for as cheaply as possible. Because I think one of the things like I found is very empowering with this is that like, sure, it's like kind of a long, arduous process, but it's not something that you can't do. If you break it down into these little pieces, okay, I have a scripting stage, I lay it out in my sketchbook, bring it to the big paper, and somewhere between there is where the final product kind of comes into its own. So it's, I don't know. I mean, I'm going to just kind of beat the street. Like I got some local comic book stores that one of them I know will definitely carry them for me. And then just kind of spread out through the South and do as many, festivals. And we have the Soda City Comic Con here in Columbia. So I'm just going to sign up for as many of these things as possible. Actually, that reminds me, we had the artist in residence at the library here was Chuck Brown. He's a comic book writer. And I brought him one of my zines and he's like, do you sell these? And I'm like, no, nobody wants to buy them. He's like, dude, if I saw this at like a con, you need to sign up for cons. Yeah. If I saw this at a con, the mini folding zine itself, I would pay $5 for this.
Yeah. There are,
so it's like, it's again, I think.
Yeah, go
ahead. I'm sorry.
No. I was just going to, I was going to say, there, before I forget, there are zine exchanges and online.
Yes.
And I think that's also a really like good place to drum up noticeability for that. So no, but you are making, let's say, the rounds in your head. I love the one-off feeling, like the sketch cover, the thing that this thing is a one of a kind now. I think that's really
you're
great.
Never going to get another Sonic the Hedgehog cover with Gut and Ghost. Because I mean, that's where I have a lot of fun with this. Is I'm like, all right, I did like the Odd Couple first, and then I did Laverne and Shirley, and now I'm doing a Batman and Robin cover. And now I'm like, what other like famous duos would this be like? Stupid enough to be funny, so it's like a lot of it is like, again, it just goes back to, does it make me laugh? And if I have the idea and I've been laughing about it for more than like 3 or 4 days, I'm like, all right, I gotta like at least sketch something out or find some resources to kind of use as like references and stuff.
Well, you are on the list to do the Indie Exchange creator exchange with Jake and I over at our Turbo Pit Fighter channel. So Jake and I are finalizing the second teaser, which is the first 12 pages and some other bonus information about the story. And yes, Jake has gotten into a zone where he's making his own font and we're experimenting with that. And so we're taking that time. As I share with the guest artists that, I've been working with here on Crom, Jake and I share the same thing, which is this shouldn't be stressful in a unnecessary level of stress. In other words, the brain sliding over into some socialized acceptance realm where you got to start figuring out how to be accepted by everybody in the world, and it should be this and it shouldn't be that, and there's just all this noise in your head, which I think destroys the best art. And
I think so, but I think being selective with that, because I wouldn't say I want to be accepted by everybody in the world. Like, there's some people, there's like some people where if they criticize it, I'd be like, yes, did I put that as a pull quote on this?
Yes, yeah.
Like, yeah, I think you need equal amounts, maybe not equal amounts, but I think you do need some of that bad press, or at least the right type of people to dislike your work.
That's a very
and then, like, again, like going back to like, I've done some markets and stuff where the audience is like very much not somebody who would read this. And like, one of the things I found very, I got a lot of joy out of was like kind of trapping people into looking at the original artwork where, after like page 2, they're like looking for an escape hatch. And I'm like, no. You started this process. You're going to look at everything that I drew and you're going to be uncomfortable through the whole thing. So I kind of enjoy when people are a little bit off put by it. I think, I think there's definitely reason to be off put by it. But at the same time, I think there's enough of a through line that is, you can follow it, but enough of it's still kind of like vague or weird. It's like, I don't know why he went this way, but all right, now we're back over here. So we'll forget about that. But it's one of those things where I hope, even if they're like, well, we could forget about that, like particularly with like these 2 pages, I hope they stick in their minds, even though they don't seem like they have anything to do with what came before it and what comes after it until the very last page where I'm like, all right, how do I bring it all together? It's like, we'll bring this figure into their living room. So yeah, I mean, it was a lot of fun trying to figure out those problems. It's, again, it's just, I was having a good time. And like, to me, I was like, all right, well, can't leave everything floating off in space. You got to have some of it come back to Earth a little bit.
It is our responsibility as artists to solve problems with creativity. Be creative. Take chances. Fail at something. Learn from the failure. Make another mistake. Change the mistake into a success. That's I think what repels. I think that's what repels people. I don't know how many people I've had run up to me when I've worked in non-arts places like grocery stores and restaurants that have come up to me and confessed, oh, I've started drawing, I've started painting, I've started reading comics, I'm going to be an artist, and 2 weeks later, oh, hey, John, how's that whole comic book? Man, that's a lot, man. There's a lot to that. Yes, there is. There is. So, not to be too much of an elitist when it comes to being, a good problem solver, as I know I am, but there is a lot of hard work. And the hardest part about being an artist, the hardest part is accepting the mistakes, the errors in judgment, the shortcomings, the failures, the person that you wanted to see it and they kind of like, but why doesn't it do? You're like, shit, I thought that. Why did I change? That's a greater, greater sense. And I just want to thank you for being poked and responding to my questions, which has led us to where we're at right now, which is, this is a very intimate process, being an artist and creating for ourselves. We're not talking about the working for the big 3 publishers and working on Spider-Man and Batman and all this kind of stuff.
Oh man, if you look at those sales lately, I don't know how much longer they're going to be making comics too.
It's going to be great.
Did you see that list that came out where it's like, oh my! I mean, again, I think it's good because it's like
it's long over.
Like 15 Batman titles a month.
It's been long over. And there's so many other elements that have converged in the last month that I think has just really taken the last breath of air out of anything rational about buying 15 comics that are so paper thin with art and story.
Oh, for sure.
At $5 to $10 a pop and variant covers and everything. And it's just
oh god.
But let's digress in the right direction. Because I do want to share just where I'm at on my Crom Revised Edition. So
let's see.
I did have you do a wonderful pin-up, which will also be a cover. So the cover is going to be like so, and then that end page when you come in. I'm really, really excited. I can't thank you enough for putting that together.
I can't wait to see it.
So, but the big thing I'm working on right now is finishing a story called Crom Illustrating. The story's been written. I actually was able to get in and fine-tune the story yet again for like the 15th time. But because I wrote this based on a 1952 pulp that Gardner F. Fox wrote called The Warlock of Sharador, which was a science fantasy type of thing. And so I have this broken up into 8.5 by 11 and 36 pages, which has 36 spot illustrations that I'm working on at the moment.
Oh, yeah.
So,
I love it.
I am too. I'm actually enjoying myself. So they're done almost twice as large. They'll probably be about 4 inches by 4 inches plus or so, probably maybe 4.25. But I'm doing my whole ink thing. I'm going to do what I'm calling the first run, the first pass. These are almost completed. But I will.
Oh, yeah.
My goal is to get all 36 done next week, so I can
love that. That's a very Robert Crom drawing right there.
Thank you. Yeah, I kind of saw once I got to this point, I kind of squinted my eyes a bit, and it's like Mel Gibson playing in Thunderdome. So I was like, dude, that's cool. So, and my goal is to get a really nice, well-organized artist proof out to all the guest artists, yourself, David Molina, Drawn Sword, and Adam Dodds. So then we get you back on here so we can start talking about, Kurt, you forgot this. Kurt, you need to do this. Oh, Kurt, we need more of this, so I can get all you guys' feedback.
Incredible.
Thank you. And then so I will be able to then get this. And this is, I don't want to stress myself out. So if it gets too much, I will push. But I'm hoping for a mid-June release, which means issues will be purchasable mid-June on kurtbrugel.com and cromthebarbarian.com. So with that being said, last episode, and as I have been speaking with the other guest artists, is the
I like that
follow-up. These are the Warlocks of Sharador, called Dogons.
Oh, yeah.
They're called Dogons. So,
dude, this is incredible. I love this architecture right here.
Thank you. So,
oh my god.
So there's, I got a lot. This one actually shows off probably a little bit more of the value I want to get in there. But, I live with an art critic, my wife, who I really do trust. I really do trust, but she's been challenging me to not go full on with my gray graphite valuing and smudging and all this kind of stuff. But I'm not convinced yet. So I'm going to move.
I don't know. There was one you showed a few back that had a really, really strong, like, chiaroscuro. I think it was another architecture thing. Let me see. Not that one. Might have been a couple before this one. I can't. You went by it pretty quick. A little bit. That one.
Oh, yeah.
That's like that one. And I think the one before that one, too. Like that really, really strong light and dark, like really
contrasting.
Like you're getting a lot of the form and the texture, and it's like, it's doing a lot. Not a lot with a little, because clearly you're not doing a little, but it's definitely a sum that's greater than its parts. I think like that. that's some like top level illustration.
Oh, thank you. I only think in the way of like maybe smudging some pencil gray, just in some areas to not keep it so high contrast. But we'll like I said,
that's a good idea, because I see you got some kind of atmospheric stuff in the background there that again, it kind of creates a halo around what you got, but it also, tells you that it's receding, gives it some depth, I think.
Yep, going in from there. So, and then I have yet to complete I'll show these off in a sec, but the cover, so this will be my cover. Guest artist, yourself included, will all have what's referred to as a virgin cover, which will just be your art. Yeah. And those issues will only be available for the 1 month that the release of the Crom Collected Revised Edition is there. Then, based on the success of those sales, I will be getting issues out to the guest artist, which will then have the ability, if somebody contacted me or even just ends up on Jason Schoonover's site and says, hey, I'd love Crom Revised Edition, but with yours, Kurt's sold out on him. He says you got some copies, and then you can go from there.
Yeah.
But I was over at a friend's house who's a very, very awesome fantasy artist, Matt Stawicki, link in the description. And he saw this, and I was showing all my pages and everything, and he jumped back, ran over to his reference file, and he pulled out these old photos he had of a friend from art school that he had still had a folder full of, and he goes, I was, as soon as I saw your wizard, I thought of these references, and he handed them to me. He goes, you should, if you want, you can use these. So I was like, oh, brother.
Yeah.
Thank you so very much.
Those are perfect.
But these are old school. This is how, and he even still works this way. A lot of friends and family. I actually posed as a dwarf for one of his paintings. So he uses real life humans to play out, and then works those photos into a preliminary drawing, which is then transferred to the larger painting, whether it's traditionally in oils or he's very proficient in deceiving us with digital painting as well. So Matt Stawicki, thank you very much for these. So once this is all good for the cover, like I said, I will be reaching out and getting these into the guest artist's hands. And then we'll be having some chat time here on Crom Updates.
Yeah.
But Jason, I want to spend just a couple minutes here at the end. In our last get together, Crom Updates, I had mentioned a Origins writer named Lord Dunsany, excuse me. And the reason I brought him up, and it's not that I want to push him, is that it made a connection, having read a lot of his work, to me speculating what type of reaction you would have. Now, you could have a reaction where you read one or two because they're poemish, like they're prosy poemish. Lord Dunsany is the Origins author next to the Viking sagas that J.R.R. Tolkien used to do Lord of the Rings. So a lot of fairies and trolls and goblins, but the way he describes them is not pretty. That's why he's not well read or known, because when you start reading his stuff, there's a bit of like repulsiveness to it. Like it's not warm and fuzzy. Like even the way Tolkien describes the goblins and such as being horrendously, whatever and stuff. But have you, because for the Crom Anthology, which would be a follow-up kind of experimental heavy metal black and white magazine-ish type format that I want to publish after this Crom Revised Edition, not forcing anybody, just inquiring whether people want to work together with me. Have you had anything on your own side that you're curious about, maybe me being interested in or not?
Yeah, like there was a couple of ideas I'd had. They haven't gotten past the realm of idea.
Right.
But like I'd mentioned to you before, like, I talked about like that kind of conspiracy theory story of the soldiers in Kandahar, like coming across a giant in a cave and having like a gun battle with them. But I've been reading. Well, I finished volume 1 of A Savage Sword of Conan. Let me grab it real quick. I won't. You can still hear me.
Yep.
But there's a story in there. Let's see. Do I have it right here? I might have put it on my shelf. But there's a story in there where a man is going through like a cave, and here it is. And he hits his head, and he wakes up, and he's like embodying Conan the Barbarian, but he's still thinking like, well, I'm still Steve Gruber or whatever, but I know that this is my sword.
Yeah, that's an Alex Nino. Yep, Alex Nino. Yep.
Yeah. It's but that one was like I read it and I was like, oh wow, this is like a structure for like, so like my idea was like maybe there's like kind of a mirror of the Marines or whatever that are going into this cave to fight this giant, and in the past, but also happening simultaneously because of magic and sorcery and the way the space-time continuum works or whatever, Conan and his, horde of you're not Conan, Crom and his horde of like what do you call it? I guess for lack of a better term, like Marines or whatever the equivalent of like Marines would be, are doing the same thing. And when both parties encounter the giant, maybe the giant, because he's kind of this like cryptid or, this being that's not natural, therefore it's supernatural. Maybe that encounter happening is kind of like it opens a doorway to where, the giant is fighting both of them at the same time. And like, maybe Conan loses all of his party in the battle and the Marines, all but one perish or whatever. And then Conan and this Conan, I keep saying Conan.
It's all right.
Crom and this Marine have to team up to basically go somewhere, like either go back to their own time or move forward through the cave to see, what would happen. And then I had this other idea, going back to the dream journal thing. I had this dream. Do you mind if I read it to you real quick? It's
Please.
like a paragraph long.
Please.
So I had this dream in September 24th of 2023. No, that can't be right. That must have been when I last edited this. Might have been 2021 or 2022. But I had this dream where I was in this big, strange building that's the headquarters of a large and influential cult. I'm going door to door, and each room is like an office. I open one door, and there's like these monks who are sitting at computers doing some sort of type of office work, but they're being kept prisoner. I talk with them, but I don't remember what they're saying. I go back into the hallway and check another door. Inside are a bunch of sexy android automatons sitting on their knees. One offers their services to me. I won't get explicit here.
Sure.
And before I can answer, begins to do so. It feels good, but I back away and I make it stop. I kneel down to get a better look, and its skin is pale, its eyes are black, and its tongue is black with these spikes that retract like scales or shark skin. It smiles at me and says something obscene. And then they all smile and I leave the room. I go upstairs, and it's like an old abandoned floor of an office building. There's a leopard up there. I go to confront it. It tries to attack me, but I grab it by the neck in a headlock and pin it to the ground with my body because I am much bigger than it. It tries to fight, but I squeeze harder, and the harder I squeeze, the more it struggles. My brother appears in the doorway, and I tell him to get something heavy to smash its head with. He returns with a piece of concrete and rolls it across the floor to me, and then leaves. I have to let go of the leopard to grab it. The floor, to grab it. The leopard tries to attack again, but I manage to headlock it with one hand and pin it down with my body and smash its head with the concrete in my other hand. I go back downstairs to inform the monks that they are free. I now must escape the building, and there's, that's kind of where the dream ends or whatever. But like, where I think that can kind of coalesce is like perhaps because of this Black Lodge space-time temporal thing that the giant is like this doorway where these two come together. Perhaps they proceed further into the cave, and like maybe instead of an office building, it's like one of the many underground palaces that, Conan comes across in the Savage Sword of Conan, and all these different elements like the monks on the computers or the android automatons or whatever, and the leopard, like, I feel like there's something that I could do with that that's not necessarily just a one-to-one. Well, let me just start writing about my dream now,
I think thank you for sharing, because that is very visually based, obviously. But I think one of the bonuses to being an artist is you have that ability. So, especially when you're able to lock in and remember, and then you do the journaling over and over again, there is just an endless amount of resources. I mean, So, but this is, I do, like David Molina and I have now agreed on a project, 6 pages, and it's based on a short pulp story called The Last Druid, by an author, 1962, Joseph Kellam. And the idea is this, and this is, I think, where we can also kind of go back to our drawing tables and think it over, is, we don't want anything too long that would eat up a lot of time, because life gets in the way.
Yeah.
It's just, if the difference between like 5 and 6 pages could mean a month, in being able to get in order to get something. So I've been trying to think along the lines and finding stuff material wise that is like between 3 and 6 pages. But
a little bit more short story format.
And the idea of collaborating is, the way I see it, is that we work out structurally the paging and the plotting of it. And then the guest artist, yourself, David Molina and such, would go back and roughly pencil out, an outline, pages, let's say. And then, we would then bring Jake in. I would ask him, obviously, I'm not forcing or making him, but he has an awesome, I call it comic bookifying material, people's material. I had him review and give me a critical feedback on my 4 stories for the Crom Revised Edition and there was just so many great viewpoints that he was able to contribute, and I really do feel like there was a double expansion of those pages that I originally had done in the ballpoint pen. So I end up, after that, then the pencils get tightened up by the guest artist. They're then given to me digitally. I then go ahead and ink them. Go back through the process, probably with Jake, just to keep that all flowing. But when it's all said and done, and let's, say it's printed by Crom Anthology, the guest artist, is still left with the pencils, which then you can create your own version of the storyline.
Gotcha. So I could do a variant where I inked it.
Yes,
that makes sense.
Because once again, my goal is, because I cannot play publisher and give a page rate or a
it's a lot of hats.
It is. But I feel the major thing that I'm contributing is the attention by, maintaining the podcast, a publication. I'm going to be sending at least 10 issues to 10 reviewers that I trust on YouTube. So, there'll be a lot of promotion. And as I've said before, and I'll say it again, I love the anthology idea because of the hopes that someone picks it up and they come across work that is by an individual such as yourself, they want to go and find more of your work because it sings truer to them than anything else. It's still curated. The CROM Anthology will still be curated, black and white, and just like you showed off the Conan the Barbarian comics and creepy and eerie and post-apocalyptic and stuff. But the reader ends up being satiated by finding more and more material that they enjoy, which you would possibly be a part of that. So, I think if there's anything that I've gotten from today's episode, as well as all the episodes leading up to this, Jason, is that I would love for you to just put a freewheeling Crom the Barbarian-ish, a 3-pager stream of conscious, and I said this to David, and it is my feeling about Crom and what I use him for is he's not a deep thinker. But at the same time, small pieces of narrative, sound effects, and obviously the sequencing leads people through, and there's just a fantastic experience that comes out of it. It's not a morality tale or
it's just
exactly. So I would you be comfortable in putting something like 3 to 5 if it really has to be that, just nothing more than rough, not even like this, just sketchy, where we can come we can come together and really kind of mold something over and then see where it goes. Number 1 is not to be stressed, but number 2 is to be playful. And that's really what I feel that this is really coming into. And I hands down enjoy spending time with you guys here on the Crom Updates, finding out what you're working on, how things are going, and can't thank you enough for putting together your version of Crom, which will be
of course. I'm having as much fun as you guys are, man. This has been quite fun connecting with all of you. And
then, of course, sending me a copy that I can print out of Ghost and Gut and Ghost. So I really, once again, can't thank you enough for taking the time and sharing as you have today.
Yeah.
And though, with that being said, is there anything that you want to put out there before we let these good people get back to reading comic books, making them if they do?
I don't got really anything upcoming. I already did that portrait competition last week, and then the only thing coming up is that Zine Fest in August.
Oh, man.
In Charleston. So if anybody's in Charleston, South Carolina in August, please come to the Zine Fest. I'll give you a link if you want to post it in the description.
So I am going to repeat once again, in the description is Jason Schoonover's Instagram and his website. He's also been doing blog posts that are comparable or in contrast, if you will, to what we have discussed on prior Crom updates. So it's very nice to get that kind of voice on the other side, coming back from a website, mind you. Good SEO, but
got to get it off of the social media. It seems like it's just not reliable.
Yeah, when I saw your posts on Instagram about the portrait contest, man, I spent every day cheering for you on that, because that takes some guts. But what you got out of it, but what you must have gotten out of it is an experience of meeting other people and
it was fantastic. I mean, I went there. It was like 3 rounds, and I went there. I was like, I'll probably just go 1 round. In my mind, I'm like, well, everybody's going to be working with color and painting, so it's like me showing up literally showing up with just like a pad of like 10 by 12 Bristol board or 9 by 12 Bristol board or whatever, and a pen, and just sitting in a chair and watching everybody like, oh, I got to pre-mix my colors and I got to do that. I'm like, I'm going to whip out, my comic book and just read it while you guys are all doing your thing. But, it also afforded me an opportunity. I talked with so many people that were there. I brought, the last remaining stacks of my zines. So like when we were done with the portraits, you put it up on an easel on the table and just plop my zines right in front of them. And I did not return with did not return with one zine. I should have printed more. Was my takeaway. Yeah, it was a great experience. I mean, and even just the nostalgic feel of like kind of recapturing being in a life drawing classroom again.
Yeah.
All the elements were there. Everybody concentrating on relatively the same thing. I don't know. It was just such a good thing to do. I got a little bit emotional on the ride home.
That's great. That is great. And as I commented, congratulations, because that is what it really means in my book to be an artist, is to drive out somewhere and just be you and do your thing. And it's always surprising. But you find, and it shouldn't be, but it's always surprising, and it's a great feeling because there is so much acceptance out there when you do meet a bunch of, I still do my life drawing, once a month, and, just getting the time to spend actively doing it, but in those breaks, being able to chat with somebody and just hearing their story and maybe a little struggle and offer a suggestion or just, it is really what it means to be an artist, is to share it. So,
I agree. And I mean, it even goes back to what you were saying about like, does everybody need to like what I'm doing? No, but like I had enough people that came up to me were like, man, like you're the only one that showed up here with just a pen, and like you really did some work with it. And I again, exchanging information with people I wouldn't have otherwise. Like I met a guy, he was me and him and his wife were in the first round painting and drawing the same model, and then me and him wound up drawing and painting the same model in the second round. But like he was a professor at Coastal Carolina University, and like again, like somebody who I would like look up to, wow. and it just meant a lot to kind of have like one of those like authority figures or whatever be like, man, you really got something here.
That's awesome.
As much as I might doubt like my not using color and stuff like that, it's just what I gravitate to. And it's like, I guess it's my nature more than anything else. And, you got to lean into that a little bit, I think.
And with that being said, once again, thanks, Jason. And I look forward to us hanging out and talking again. So you take care.
Yeah, you too, Kurt.